Two Real Cinema Club. I'm James Rosica.
And I'm Andres Lorente. And every other week on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch a couple of movies, sometimes very long ones. And then we tell you whether or not to listen to them, watch them. And sometimes we tell you not to, I suppose.
Yeah, sometimes we're warning you off. It's our community service.
We're providing a service here at Two Real Cinema Club.
This week, at last, the whole world can listen to the opinions of two middle-aged men on the Barbie movie. And we're comparing that to...
Il s'appelle, that's French, Il s'appelle, oh my God, I wrote so many notes on this film. Woo! It's called Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080 Bruxelles.
Very good. I will be calling it Jeanne Dielman for the rest of the pod, and probably feeling a bit self-conscious about poorly pronouncing even those two words. Right, before we talk about the movies, though, one longer than the other, we should quickly do the socials. We had a message this week saying, don't spend so much time on the socials. And I feel like somehow instead of giving up the socials are kind of giving us up. I think our Twitter account recently stopped working, or at least Podbean no longer automatically posts to Twitter. Oh. So even Elon Musk is trying to nobble us. Ooh. So we are on maybe Twitter, possibly we are Two Real Cine Club at x.com. Maybe, might still be working, I don't know. We are Two Real Cinema Club at instagram.com. You can read the blog, tworealcinemaclub.com. And address your emails. That's what we want. We want emails. Yeah, we're living firmly in the Tom Hanks late 20th century era. Address your emails to tworealcinemaclub@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. That is the address to use if you want to tell us your opinion, ask us questions, offer us sponsorship, or if you want to explain exactly why you think noise-cancelling headphones for dogs are a good idea or a bad idea. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll hear. The dogs won't hear anything, of course. They'll be wearing noise-cancelling headphones, but we are all ears. And finally, do leave us a review if you can. I hesitate to say like and subscribe. I promised I would never say that, so I'm not going to say that, but I just did. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, or wherever else you get your podcasts.
Ooh. Well done, James.
So after promising to abbreviate the socials, I haven't. That was longer than ever that time.
No, but it was great. And then I realized maybe we're not providing such a good service after all. Did we suggest noise-canceling headphones for dogs?
I think we did, didn't we? What a great idea.
That is ridiculous. Oh my God. We'll come to regret that. I just wanted to open with a quick shout-out to you.
Oh, yes.
This week.
Now what have I done?
Do you guys do kudos in England?
I think it's kudos.
Kudos.
I think it is in this country, which is probably the same word.
We say kudos. Kudos.
Yes.
Kudos.
Kudos. I think kudos. You know how we love to queue in this country.
Yeah. So you do. We don't do that here, that's for sure. So we do kudos instead. I just wanted to remind the Two Real Cinema Club family that you have a gem in Dr. Rosica. And I say that because I listened to the Popcorn Counter last week with Stephen Ray Liedlich, which I thought you did a fabulous job on. You weaved together a story that was dead for 25 years. You made it entertaining and informative. And I loved the song excerpts and the sound extracts that you added. It really brought it to life. And our listeners probably don't know that my audio actually dropped out for about the final 10 minutes or so. And I was just looking at you guys and talking to you I could see you on the video. And I just saw you guys nodding along, thinking this podcast is going to be so much better without me, the blabbermouth, involved. And it was a great Popcorn Counter. I thought it was fantastic. Listeners should go back and listen to that. That's like episode, 73?
73, yeah.
73. Go find that because I think you did a great job cutting it all together. It's really an editing masterpiece, and you are the driving force behind this program or this podcast. So thank you, and maybe the listeners should write us an email thanking Dr. Rosica for his work.
Yeah, get the noise-cancelling headphones off your dog and write us an email. I will tell you, the Popcorn Counter is only as good as the interviewees, and Steve was a great interviewee.
He was great. Yeah, he was great. And Michael Primer recently has been great, too. So we're on a roll, and join us.
And I tell you what, I'd never realised how good you are at lip reading, that you were able to contribute to the whole pod while only seeing our cameras and not listening to the audio at all.
It's a sad moment for many reasons.
Right, to the cinema. This week we have been to see Barbie. And kind of, so we did Oppenheimer last time round, and we've done Barbie this time round, and Barbieheimer has kind of become this weird social media meme that's pervaded the whole kind of internet sphere. At least most of the internet sphere. I think I have read that a lot of people in Japan have been complaining about the Barbieheimer meme because it just seems like quite poor taste to them. And you know what? They're right. Barbieheimer, it seems like I don't really understand why it's an acceptable combination, actually, apart from a coincidence of scheduling. It's a little bit like saying, Schindler's List and the Lego Movie. Those two to go together very well, don't they? Let's Lego Schindler. It's hilarious. But actually, it's kind
Lego
of not.
List. Oh, God, it's terrible. Yeah. I think, it's just the fact that they came out at the same time, and it was American laziness, I think, more than anything else.
And if you were the distributor of these films, you've got to assume that this was a fairly safe pairing that week. Surely the overlap for Barbie and Oppenheimer not very wide, and yet somehow they've managed to kind of use each other as leverage. I don't know how that works. Well done, distributors. So the Barbie movie, directed by Greta Gerwig. And please write in to tell me that I've pronounced her name wrong. She directed Little Women a couple of years ago. Have you seen that?
I have seen that, and Lady Bird, which I think preceded.
Yeah.
That was her first director.
And Frances Ha before that. Of those movies, Little Women is the only one that I have seen, but it's a terrific picture. I thought it was a lovely feature. Very good. The film was written by Gerwig with Noah Baumbach, well-known Wes Anderson collaborator. He wrote on The Life Aquatic with Steven Zissou. Mm-hmm. He wrote on Fantastic Mr. Fox. He wrote on Frances Ha. Interestingly, he also was a contributor to Madagascar 3. I don't know whether you have seen that, but by far the best of the Madagascar animated films for kids. Good fun, Madagascar 3, actually. Really good.
I still have to get to the first one. Is it called Madagascar 1?
It's just called Madagascar. But probably 3 doesn't make sense if you haven't seen the first one at least, but 3 is probably the best of the bunch. It's good. Big starry cast. Margot Robbie was apparently like the 4th or 5th in line to play Barbie, and a lot of people turned it down before she said yes. Ryan Gosling is Ken. America Ferrara, Kate McKinnon, Will Ferrell channeling that Lego movie energy. Star-studded. And it's being a hit. It's passed 1 billion quite recently and still going.
Was that a billion?
Yeah, a Barbie billion, absolutely. So I don't think anyone anticipated it was going to quite make this kind of money. Well done on the promotion. Shall I tell you what it's about?
Please do.
So, the film starts with a brief 2001 A Space Odyssey homage. And my daughter, when she went to see the film, came back absolutely glowing that she identified what the homage was. She was so pleased. I understood that joke. So after the opening, we dive deep into the world of Barbie, heavily Mattel-branded Barbie. Barbie is a toy doll who lives happily in Barbie land with hundreds of other Barbies and dozens of Kens, all of them played with by unseen hands. They spend their days driving to the beach in her pink convertible. They spend their evenings dancing in formation until one night, exactly 15 minutes into the film, I checked my watch, she finds herself derailed by an existential crisis. Do you ever think about death? She asks her Barbie friends. Something is wrong. And the only one with any answers is local guru Weird Barbie. It turns out the girl playing with Barbie must be the source of these negative thoughts, Weird Barbie says, and the only way to stop them is to visit the real world, find her owner, and help her. And we have a movie. So Barbie and Ken journey in her pink convertible to the real world. In this case, the real world means Santa Monica, Los Angeles. Is that like the real world? Well, your guess is as good as mine. They go there anyway to find her girl. But as Barbie tries to help, Ken becomes enchanted by the power, confidence, and self-determination that men seem to enjoy in the real world. So he takes a handful of books back to Barbie Land to establish a patriarchy. Meanwhile, the executives at Mattel, trademark, discover that there is a Barbie loose in the real world, and they have to try and track her down before there are dire consequences for the whole of Greater Los Angeles. And that is the basic setup for the movie.
Ooh, well done. And I like the trademark Mattel because the branding is crucial in this film.
The branding is very heavy in this film. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Did you enjoy Barbie?
I really liked this film, yeah. I was surprised how much I liked this film. But there are massive caveats that we'll get to. But
I must say, I did come away feeling that it's clever and fresh and current, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
I do have some questions about the way that it uses its currency. A lot of the film ends up largely, for a film with Barbie in the title, the film is largely about the manosphere. It's a film, I think, about the effect of Jordan Peterson and Andrew Tate on the modern world. It's kind of, it's about Trump. It's wearing its political badge on its sleeve, and then there's an enormous amount to enjoy. Yeah. My question to you is going to be, though, for all its currency, did you laugh?
I did. Again, I'm always writing notes in the dark in the theaters, so I smile. I think I smile more. I smile, laugh. I did. I laughed outright a few times, and it was more. It's wittier than I think it is funny. I think that's probably what it is.
That's a good way of phrasing it.
Yeah. So if you're reading in between the lines and the subtext, it's not that deeply buried. So it's easy to just smile at things, I think, but not laugh hilariously. I don't think it's a full on comedy. There's some great moments, and some of the song and dance stuff really made me. That was an opportunity to laugh, I think, because they're singing and dancing. You're not disrupting any dialogue or anything like that. So I think some of those moments were laugh out loud. So I did laugh. Yeah, not tons. Again, I don't think it's entirely comedy. I think there's more social commentary, as you sort of alluded to.
I don't know whether you've seen the Lego movie.
I have not.
I think Barbie this film has drunk deeply from the well of the Lego movie. And the Lego movie, it's a very sparky Lord and Miller script. Very fun. I guffawed out loud many times at the Lego movie. I've seen it several times with the children, and it still makes me laugh. And I thought that Barbie was trying to mine that same seam, and it's not as funny. I enjoyed it, but I appreciate your comment that it's wittier than it is funny. Yeah. There are a bunch of great gags. There are good gags. Yeah. In fact, would you mind if we ring the spoiler bell now, and then I can talk about some of the gags?
I think you have to. I think you've shown great restraint in not ringing the spoiler bell.
I'm gonna ring it now. I've had my hand on the hammer for too long. I'm gonna ring the spoiler bell now. Sorry, I forgot how loud it was. And so there is a great speech towards the end of the movie about being a woman, which is witty and funny, and it's not something that we haven't heard elsewhere, and it comes straight out of a number of people's stand-up sets, I guess. But it's a terrific speech, and I really enjoyed it. And there are some great heavy-handed gags about kind of mansplaining. The final, one of the final gags in the film is Barbie. After the story gets resolved and Barbie manages to dismantle the Barbie land patriarchy, she tells Ken that she promises him one day he will have all the power and influence that women enjoy in the real world, which I thought was one of the best gags. Yeah. So there is plenty to laugh at. But I also did find that some of the gags fell flat. The whole thing could have been just a little bit smarter. And interestingly, I know we often complain when films have multiple writers. Gags, I think, are about the one thing that it is possible to throw many writers at and get something for your money.
Sure.
And that's always kind of been my dream gag. Producers who are tuning in, that's my dream gig, is to be told to kind of smarten up and write gags on almost any script. I'll very happily come in and write you 20 gags on any script. And if 2 or 3 of them stick and 2 or 3 of them stay in the script, then I feel like my job has been done. Yeah. Writing gags is a fun gig, and it is a way to smarten up a script pretty quickly. But overall, maybe they should have got Lord and Miller in to come and do a quick comb through the script and kind of buff up the gags a little bit. But that's churlish. There's plenty to enjoy. There are some things in the film that could have been cut, though. And if I was going to nominate anything to try and speed up the whole movie, there is an entire subplot where Barbie goes to the the Mattel building and ends up causing a bit of a Benny Hill style chase with the entire board of Mattel, which I thought could be entirely cut. Will Ferrell, who has a big part in the Lego movie and feel like he's been drafted in here to do the same kind of job. His entire subplot basically is extraneous. I think it could and should be cut. Did you enjoy Will Ferrell in this movie, or did he feel superfluous to you?
Superfluous. I think they do all their business in the one shot. Then one of the first time you see this board, it's all white men in suits, and I think that's all they needed to do, really, because it's almost as if it's just another layer of antagonism that's unnecessary. I mean, the antagonists are really the Kens, who are sort of rising up against Barbie Land and making it into a patriarch. So that's the real antagonism. So then you get this secondary bit, which is very weak, really. They're trying to force Barbie back into the box for whatever reason, and that's going to solve all the problems. And then they chase, I guess you haven't gone into too much detail in the story, but they chase Barbie and her new allies back into Barbie Land, and it takes them forever to get there. So they arrive very late. They're not very scary. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that definitely came up on my list. I hadn't thought about cutting them entirely, but at least making them stronger. But they are superfluous. I think you're right.
I mean, you could chop 20 minutes out of the film, which would probably leave you a little bit more space for some gags. And I think the story and the whole point of the story still works just as well. I agree. If they were relegated to a single gag where you open the boardroom and it's all white men, there you go. There's your best gag. Well done. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's it. That's all you need to do. A group of white men in suits trying to get a woman into a box. That's the metaphor. That's the moment. And then it loses its power as a result of just keeping them in the film and having them clumsily ride a 9-person bicycle back into Barbie Land or whatever it is. And yeah, it just doesn't work.
It does kind of lead me on to my other, and I don't want to be a downer on this film because I did really enjoy it and I kind of sat beaming through most of it. But my other kind of downer is what is happening with the story world in this film. There's kind of two story worlds where the story happened. There is the story world of Barbie Land, and I feel like that's really well thought out. And then they visit the real world, and the real world is just all over the place. I simply don't really understand what are the rules in the real world. This notion of a kind of a fantasy character who then comes from the world of stories into the real world has been done many times before. We've seen it in Enchanted and Last Action Hero, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This is a fairly standard trope. But this time round, I just don't really understand or recognize the real world that they go to. This kind of Santa Monica that they enter, it seems kind of barely less cartoonish than Barbie Land. They arrive on sort of Santa Monica Beach, and they pass a bunch of construction workers who are all sitting down, and they take turns to make sexist comments. They visit a school that's quite happy to admit strange-looking adults in revealing clothing. They're allowed to steal books from the library. Nobody kind of mentions anything about why is a man in a cowboy outfit stealing books from the school library. That seems suspect. I mean, the people in the Mattel Corporation are at least as cartoony as Barbie Land. So I don't really understand how this kind of this fish out of water story works when she's kind of gone from one water to a pretty similar water, maybe with a different color palette, but otherwise the rules kind of seem all over the place.
And that could be kind of intentional just to show how, and maybe we'll talk about this with our friends at the Squad later, but how Playland like Los Angeles is and the filmmaking industry is, and even obviously the toy making industry is. But I also think that you cannot start looking for the logic behind the curtain in this film, because presumably everything that happens in Barbie Land is the result of young people playing with Kens and Barbies everywhere. And there's one person playing with, what do they call her? Stereotypical Barbie?
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
There's one person playing with it. It's actually an adult America Ferrera's role. And that one person is able to change the behavior of the doll, even though millions are playing with it all at the same time. And then everything that happens in Barbie Land presumably is the result, if you follow the logic, presumably the result of people playing with Barbie Land in the real world. So I think you just cannot look at the logic of it at all. And I mean, in some ways it seems appropriate that they make Los Angeles and Santa Monica look like Playland as well. But yeah, don't look too carefully. I mean, and the one line that I really liked, which sort of stated the theme, I think it's right around when she meets. I think Barbie's run into some trouble in the real world, and she finally says, "The real world isn't what I thought it was." And I thought that's kind of like the whole theme of the movie to a certain extent. That and buy toys. That's the other theme of the movie. But I wouldn't look too hard at it. I think it's a little bit of laziness in the writing and the filmmaking, I think.
So I mean, you are right that part of the message of the film is buy toys, but I did come away slightly feeling, well, I wasn't sure who this film is for. Who is it aimed for? I feel like the main thrust of the story is about the manosphere, and yet the obvious market is it's either families, or I'm going to make a bit of a sexist suggestion here, which is the main market is girls, but the main political content is about ideas which are addressed to men. Even like the biggest set piece in the movie, which is glorious and tremendously enjoyable, is the huge Ken dance-off that happens towards the end of the second act, and that's like an exclusively male event. And I kind of feel like is a child audience well served by a film which is largely about toxic men having an epiphany? It feels like there are a number of jigsaw pieces here which have sort of been sandwiched together when they don't quite fit. And the ultimate result is a enjoyable confection, but I'm not sure that all the ingredients quite mesh together to make a single meal. Yeah. So you have just alluded, though, to what I thought was my very favourite plot point, and something which I think is sort of fairly significant. My favourite moment in the film is this great story surprise when it turns out, this is like I suppose it's a midpoint maybe, when it's the surprise is that the person who has been playing with stereotypical Barbie is an adult and not a child. Yeah, this notion of adults playing with children's toys, I don't know, that's something that just really gets to me. I don't know why. When I know from my own experience, playing with toys, it is still kind of fun as an adult. I remember my nephew once asking me at Christmas, he was kind of asking me, wasn't it boring being an adult because you don't have any toys to ask for? And I kind of explained to him, actually adults have plenty of toys, but they don't look like children's toys. And adults have motorbikes or expensive stereo systems. All these things are essentially toys, but they are the adults' toys. And Lego now, I see, have many ads which directly target adults. And they show adults building these complicated Lego sets and saying, hey, great, Lego is for adults. Don't be embarrassed if you want to go and buy Lego and make it yourself. My neighbour a few doors down is very, very proud of his Lego Death Star, but he forbids his sons from playing with it. It's his. He's not letting his kids touch it. I find there's something kind of bittersweet and rarely seen about that kind of inner child adult playing with toys, which I find kind of surprisingly authentic and moving. Actually, I enjoyed that plot point a lot.
I think it answers your last question too. Is that who's this for? I think it's actually for the people who buy the Barbies, and those are not the children; those are the adults. So this film necessarily works on a certain level of nostalgia for the adults who remember playing with Barbie and who are currently buying Barbies for their children. I think. So I think that answers that question about who it's for sure. And then I think there's been this trend, I'm going to go back maybe 30 years, where the children's, who's buying the tickets for these children's movies? It's the adults. Yep. So then they started to make things like Aladdin, I think it was the first thing I remember, with Robin Williams vamping all the time, really bringing some adult humor into it so that it's not an adult reluctantly sitting down and watching some vapid children's film. It's an adult taking a child, and it's sort of for both generations, I guess. And I think that's a pretty narrow line to walk. I don't think this works as a children's film straight up, other than it's eye candy. And, it's 2 hours, so that's sort of an adult attention span. Well, maybe not the modern adult, but most kids are not going to sit still for 2 hours. So I think it's definitely for adults. Definitely at the screening I went to, there were plenty of children in pink and all that. It's become sort of a cult movie or a period piece already. But I think it's largely for the adults, and I think it's all about buying Barbie. I hate to ruin the secret, and the ones who buy Barbie are the parents.
You are right, I suppose. I think Rachel suggested that maybe the film is aimed at adults who used to play with Barbie, because there are a number of gags which maybe aren't easily explicable if you've never played with Barbie. This notion of having a weird Barbie, the Barbie that you kind of scribbled on and you cut her hair, but you didn't want to throw her away because she's Barbie. So you end up having this kind of weird Barbie that you don't know what to do with. Those sorts of things are maybe ideas that are not obvious unless you yourself have done that playing.
Yeah.
So it's partly about an audience who are the age of America Ferrera, who is now remembering playing with Barbie rather than playing with her currently. I got a question for you about who the film is for, because there was one gag which I really thought, maybe I just do not understand this gag at all. Maybe this is a gag which is more understandable to a different audience. I don't get it. I think there is some gag about how when Ken arrives with Barbie in the so-called real world, and he's very impressed by the confidence and the agency that men have here. The men he's modelling himself on are men at Century City. And they say it's a couple of times, and I was trying to understand, is there something about Century City? Is it that Century City is commonly like a hangout for gay men, and the idea that all the men that Ken so admires are actually self-determined, confident gay men, and not straight men who would be pursuing Barbies in the Barbieland world that Ken thinks they are. Is that the gag? Because I wondered whether there's some cultural reference there that I just don't get.
I think there's actually a clever irony there in the sense that Century City is also it's a big filmmaking place. So it's almost, he's actually seeing a mirror of himself and thinking that's the real world. So these are like these stereotypical masculine men. Ironically, even someone like Rock Hudson, who of course later on came out as gay, but played these studly and masculine characters in films, and the John Waynes and all that. So, and he's infatuated with horses, right? He thinks that horses are some clue to indicate masculinity. So I think it's really kind of a clever mirror of him actually seeing a fantasy world, thinking it's the real world, and then taking that back in order to begin to garnish some power in Barbie Land and turn it into a patriarchy. That was my take on it. So for me, it's a nice gag. It's a little bit subtle, perhaps, and maybe that's why it escaped you. But I think, when you talk about Century City, I think of real, like the heart of filmmaking. But
right, okay, yeah. So that utterly escaped me. Unsurprising, of course, that I know nothing about the heart of filmmaking. That's my career in a nutshell. There, yes.
The dark heart. It's the dark heart of filmmaking.
There were a few. I'm reading far too much internet at the moment, so it means that Trump and his many indictments are often at the front of my mind. Yeah. I did feel like there were a lot of fairly straightforward fingers pointing directly at Trump in this film. Yeah. And again, I don't know whether that is me inferring more than is really there. In the Will Ferrell scene, I feel like they made a kind of a reference to that that binders full of women gaffe. That I can't now remember the American the Republican candidate who said, "I was given binders full of women." Who was that?
Oh, I don't know. Binders full of women.
Binders. He was kind of criticized for having no women on his kind of team, and he was like, "Oh no, I've been given binders full of women."
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that again is intentional or whether that is something which has simply come out of this kind of manosphere coverage anyway.
I think it's intentional. I think it ties to the Century City bit as well, in terms of this Make America Great Again sense that the country was greater in the 50s or the 60s when men were on horses and very masculine. You didn't have to worry about people being binary or non-binary, or gays were in the closet. And I think that really points right at Trump. So even the binders full of women might have been a Trump thing. The film seems pretty focused on sort of modern conservatism and the Make America Great Again philosophy.
But then, as important as it is to address these current issues, I was kind of disappointed that in a film about Barbie, called Barbie, but where Barbie is the central character, the main thrust of the story is kind of about Barbie reacting to Ken. I felt like she kind of wasn't given as much agency in her own film as I thought she would have.
Yeah.
It's like all of her energy really is spent trying to tackle the way that Ken has messed up, rather than have problems which really belong to her, which she can address on her own terms. But I felt that there was more Ken in Barbie's movie than I felt entirely comfortable with.
That's a good point. I have another reading on this film. I would spell it Barbie, Barbee. Because there's some moments where I realize, like, Barbie Land in the beginning is a real beehive of female empowerment. They're flying planes, they're doing all the construction, they're doing all the work.
Yep.
And the Kens are kind of useless, which is exactly what happens in a beehive. The males, the drones, are only good for mating with the queen and nothing else. So I do see it as this, this female empowerment film, and how we'd probably be much better off. We would be much better off if the world were run by our queen bees, I think. So I do see it as a real feminist piece, and I think sadly it's honest, though, in the sense that for my entire lifetime, for the history of the world, basically, women have had to react to the mistakes of men, or the decisions of men, let's say. So I think it still works, but you do have a good point. Is there's a lot of reactivity, I guess, or reaction writing here and plotting here. Still think it's good. I think it still makes a good point, though, in that way, and that the women really, when the women were running things, it was perfect in Barbie Land, and then as soon as Ken comes back with his horsey philosophy, things go to crap. And I think I think that's an intentional theme. I think it's done intentionally. But again, I keep thinking, oh, well, this is all the boys and girls and children playing with Barbies in the real world that are dictating what happens in Barbie Land. And I think that you can't accept that logic, because that doesn't really work here once they've gone into the real world. It's almost like they've brought in some contamination to Barbie Land, and the real world patriarchy starts to invade Barbie Land.
Right, yeah, it's another one. There's kind of moments where I'm asking, what exactly are the rules? How does this work? But I can get too hung up on that. Absolutely, I think as a big, bright, pink neon metaphor, I think it works, and it's very enjoyable. For all that, though, I wonder whether we can still find a couple of indictments that the Cliche Squad might be interested in.
I believe we can. We can do this.
Cliche Squad.
To channel our inner Barbie and call it out.
I feel a little bit bad sicking the Cliche Squad on this movie, because a lot of the film is about the active deconstruction of cliches, or of challenging stereotypes. And stereotype is the name of one of the main characters, so it's it's the film is trying to address these things. There are a couple of little things I did note in my book while we were watching the film. One of them, because I've been criticized for it myself. The idea that when you have an argument with somebody, you throw their clothes out of an upper story window. I put that in one of my early scripts, and I was told off for it quite roundly by saying, this is something that happens in every film and never happens in real life. Do not put this in scripts. And and here it happens here again quite early on. And my other kind of cliche that I'm always a bit wary of is the small world cliche, when you get characters who are connected in two ways in order to simplify the plot. So here, America Ferrara's character is Gloria. That's it. She is the one who has given Barbie an existential crisis and brought her to the real world, but she also works for Mattel, designing Barbies. And it feels, kind of when I saw that, it really feels like a plot element that's left over from an earlier draft that was never deleted somehow. There's really no reason for her to work for Mattel designing Barbies. It's it's absolutely fine for her to be somebody who is an adult playing with Barbies that used to belong to her child. And it kind of adds nothing to the story, so it just ends up making the real world feel somehow more small and contrived.
It's just a realistic contrivance. I think it's a coincidence. It's just a coincidence.
These things happen all the time.
All the time. Yeah, and an extension of that is just how easy it was to find America Ferrera's daughter, Sasha. One school, all Barbie has to do is sit on a bench, and in a city of millions, in L.A., L.A., it's a big place. So it's amazing how just sitting on that park bench and thinking about it, she can go right to the school where the mother of where the daughter of America Ferrera's character is. Yep, that's definitely cliched.
It's all in the name of shortening the story. Well done.
For me, I had a couple cliches, and I realized the reason these really jumped out to me, I think, in hindsight, is that they really affect the story. And we sort of talked about them. So L.A., Los Angeles, as an image-obsessed playground for the thoughtless. I mean, I think that's just, it's kind of real, so I get it, but it is also a cliche. And I think it's sort of, it affects the film in the sense that the playground, the playland, Barbie playland, isn't much different from LA, as you alluded to earlier. And I think that's, I think it ends up hurting the story. So that's a cliche that I think hurts the story. They could have gone somewhere else for the real world, or maybe spread their wings a little bit, have her travel a little bit more or something. But I didn't think that worked very well. And I also just, the whole film sort of lacks a little bit of darkness. And I think that's in part because LA is, it's treated very brightly and warmly, and it's not dark enough. Like the Mattel characters are not dark enough, and that leads me to my next one. Is that the other cliche I think is incompetent businessmen in suits. I mean, you see a board full of men, and I get it. I like this as a cliche. I like the fact that they use it, but I wanted to see them be so much darker and much more nefarious, and they're not. And in part, it's because you can't really criticize. Oh wait, what is it? You can't bite the hand that feeds you. This is Mattel, so I guess you can't portray the Mattel board as being very dark. But maybe a little later in the podcast, we'll talk about how they are kind of dark. So those are my two, and I think in hindsight, they jumped out at me because they really affect the story, I think, in a negative way.
I wonder, the story could have simply been improved by having the Mattel Corporation have their headquarters in Baltimore, couldn't it?
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
Detroit or something like that. It's where they needed to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, there's still more to talk about Barbie, but we'll have a break. We'll have an ad. And then we'll come back. And I think Barbie will kind of inform a little bit of our discussion about Jeanne Dielman.
Yeah.
So there's more to say. Let's have a break now and we'll come back.
Perfect.
At last, after many months of preparation, the Two Reel Cinema Club is delighted to announce the launch of our new service. It's a social media platform. It's a messaging app. It's a payment and banking app, and it's called F. F will be your one-stop shop for everything in your digital life. Want to contact your friends? F 'em. Want to tell the world your thoughts? F it. Tag your buddies in photos and video clips by telling them they've been effed. Soon you'll be effing it up with people all around the world. It'll be the first word on everyone's lips. F this, F that, F the lot of you. Download the F app and you'll be shouting from the rooftops. F it all. And we never forget that the user experience is at the heart of everything we do. You're our customers, and our first thought is always, how can we absolutely F you up as much as possible? So get effed today. Did you say you wanted a social media app that's kind, inclusive, and well-moderated? Well, F you.
Awesome. Now we're in money. That's what is going to make us some money.
That's going to make us some money, yeah. I might start making electric cars, too. Oh, Mitt Romney, that was it.
Oh,
it was Mitt Romney who said, "Yeah, I've been given binders full of women." Is what he said.
Yeah. And welcome back from Barbie Land, all you Two Reel Cinema Club listeners. And when we say "F you," we mean it in the kindest, most loving, most supportive way you can possibly imagine. The other film we watched this week, Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080 Bruxelles. That's the title.
I could listen to you say that all week, you know. You say it so well.
I don't think I can say it all week, so that's not an option for you. Just the title, very banal, and sort of indicates how overlooked this protagonist is. It's like her address, and the things that happen there are the film. And I've got to ask you why, and I've got to preface it with... I won't tell you how I feel about this film for a little while.
Okay.
I felt like this was Blonde payback. I asked you to watch Blonde last fall. It was 3 hours. This is 3 hours, 20 minutes. I think it's 22 minutes exactly. I think this is a great pairing for bizarre reasons, but I want to know why you did this to us.
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
I mean, you are right that this is it's a bizarre pairing. It'd be difficult to sell this to any theatre owners as a viable double bill, but I do think these films kind of belong together. So this film last year, I think in 2022, it went straight to the top of the Sight and Sound Best Films of All Time list.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I realized, I've never seen this film. I'm embarrassed to say I had never even heard of it.
Yeah.
And so when I read a little bit about it, I thought, well, actually, this is a challenging film about the lives of women in the 20th century. Maybe this is actually kind of the right film to pair it with Barbie. In a way it is, and in a way it absolutely is not. Mm-hmm. But I thought this is a good excuse, and I feel like, part of our remit, we watch an old film and a new film, and generally the old film, we don't choose duffers.
Yeah.
It feels reasonable that we ought to watch what is now officially the greatest film of all time.
Yeah.
So this seemed like the right opportunity. Had you heard of this film before?
Never. I hadn't heard of it until it was the #1 film of all time in film history, international film history, and on everyone's top lists. No, I had never heard of it before. I know now that it was written and directed by Chantal Akerman, features Delphine Seyrig in the title role of Jeanne Dielman, or as we might say in the United States, Jeanne Dielman. And I actually think, whereas Barbie Land is the play world and their real world is still kind of the play world, this film is very much the real world.
Yeah, the real world in real time, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's, I learned that it was a 5-week shooting schedule. And it was made with a $125,000 grant from the Belgian government and grossed $3,600. I find that really hard to believe, but that's what IMDb had. So I'm sure it's made some more money than that. It's made in 1975, or released in 1975. And I think about that shooting schedule. I want to talk with you later about how do you rehearse for this film or what this script looks like, but maybe I should dig into the story. But I'm going to invite you to chime in a little bit, because this is the kind of film where I'm doing a lot of thinking while I'm watching and writing notes. So I kind of made a longish synopsis, but I feel like there are going to be some moments where we can sort of talk about the film as we go.
That's great. I wrote a synopsis for this film and it was 2 sentences. So
oh, really?
You've done much better than me, yeah.
Well, the other thing is, and then, does it make sense to have a spoiler bell when very little happens? Is there much to spoil?
I think there is something massive to spoil.
I agree.
Let's talk a little bit. I think we should read the spoiler bell in part. I think it's worth discussing the Google synopsis for this film after we've talked about it a little bit, because I think there is a spoiler bell worth ringing.
Yeah. Okay. So Jeanne Dielman is, I call her a house widow. She's she's at the titular address where she keeps house impeccably. She has these very concrete routines for cooking and cleaning, which we see repeatedly with very little dialogue or music. You just get the impression she's a loner, but she's very well put together, always dressed in a skirt and heels, and sometimes she has one of these house coats, a cleaning sort of cover for her more elegant clothing. She is fastidious and efficient. She never leaves an incandescent light in an even temper. She never leaves it on in even a temporarily empty room. And I can't tell you how pleased I was to see that, because it's great characterization, number one. But I also live in a house where it appears everyone is up and awake at all times of day and night because no one ever turns a light off. So it was just refreshing. But all these details, just painstakingly delivered to film, make this seem like a very mundane film, because it's just focusing on all the ever-present tasks of life, all the chores. And I watched this film over 3 nights. So it's 3 hours, 22 minutes. I watched an hour each night, and it happens to take place over the course of 3 days. So it actually worked out really well for me. You said you watched it a little differently, and maybe the results were mixed.
Well, we watched. We were aware that it's a 3-hour, 20-minute film, so we watched an hour, and then had to go and start doing kind of chores and get dinner ready and things like that, and then settle down to watch the remaining 2 hours and 20 quite late on Sunday.
Oh, okay.
So I wonder whether watching it over 3 nights, that's almost watching it in real time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the right way to watch it. I don't know.
It worked beautifully for me, and I also found myself just focused on my own chores. I washed my dishes very beautifully. I tidied my belongings. I even flossed my teeth 2 of the nights during the film. And this is an inspirational film in that sense. Hitchcock, Alfred, famously said that a good film is just like life with all the boring bits cut out. And this film is just like life with all the boring bits left in.
Yeah.
And actually, these boring bits are sort of made the center of just lingering attention for a while. At the end of the first act, somewhere on the first day, a man arrives, rings the bell. She lets him in. He spends time with Jeanne in a back bedroom of the small apartment. And he gives her money as he leaves. We don't see anything that happens in the back bedroom. And then Jeanne just very carefully washes her entire body in a long bathroom scene. It very clean after this scene. And I think this is probably where I would ring a spoiler bell.
Yeah, let's ring it now, because there are things to spoil in this film. Absolutely. Here we go. Right. Listeners, you are warned, spoil away.
Yeah. Well, the next thing is the spoiler is that a lot of the same stuff happens again. Lots of cooking and cleaning and tidying the apartment. The viewer has a lot to do with this story, a lot of work to do, I think, because the pace of the film, it moves very carefully, slowly, I guess. You have a lot of time to work out some of the exposition. So you're thinking after that first visit from the man on day one that Jeanne is a sex worker. You figure that out. You have to do a little bit of work here. But she lives this, again, we said, it's a very modest and orderly life. I think it's in a busy part of Brussels, so you don't really know where this apartment is. You don't see the exterior until probably the end of the first day in the film. There are these flashing lights coming in through the dining room windows, and which is also sort of like the salon windows. So it feels like she's in a port part of the town or a factory district, and this light just invades her world all day and night. She doesn't seem to do anything about it. She never closes the curtains or anything, but it is an interesting little touch. So you have to, as a viewer in this film, you've got to start thinking about, why are we seeing all these things? What's important? And you sort of have to work out the exposition for yourself. But we do learn that Jeanne has a son, Sylvain. He comes home and they have this routine together that just happens day after day, eating dinner. They read together. He does some homework. She always asks him to stop reading at the table when they're eating. They prep his bed, which is the sort of a fold-out sofa in the salon and dining room space. There's very little dialogue in the film, which it first seems kind of stilted and unnatural, but I think it's appropriate because, again, it sort of isolates Jeanne in her world, in her mind. She has little to say to the men who pay her for sex, and she doesn't have a whole lot in common with her, now fatherless son, other than life's basics. So I think the silence, as stilted as it kind of seems and unnatural as it seems, I think it lends to the story again. So again, the listener, the viewer has to work this out a little bit. Jimmy, what's your take on that? I mean, the silence and...
I mean, it's like it's the soundtrack of quiet desperation, isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't realize until I read a little bit about this film that this is part of the slow cinema movement, which is, again, something that I had never known, although I have seen plenty of films which follow this kind of pattern. As are Balthazar. The donkey movie we watched a few months ago counts there. And then Solaris and Stalker. Even like one of my favourite films ever, The Taking of Power by Louis XIV, sorry, by Roberto Rossellini, I think must surely be in this genre. And like Cachet, if you remember that, Hidden. Even Close Up, which is the Kiarostami film, which I thought was terrible. I saw that film twice and I fell asleep both times. Oh yeah. But there are lots of films in this kind of slow cinema genre. It asks you to adjust to the pace of the film. The shots are very, very long, to the extent that I was wondering whether the length of the shots was largely determined by the length of a piece of 35mm film. That was going to determine how long the shot was, because it couldn't last longer than 4.5 minutes, because that's how long you were able to shoot without changing the reel. The camera is absolutely static. I love the camera work in this. I mean, I think it's fantastic. I love static cameras, but here, the camera has been put on a tripod and not touched. And you let the story unfold in front of a completely static camera. There's a relatively shocking moment towards the end of, I think, is it towards the end of the second day, or maybe it's during the third day, when things start to go a little bit haywire and she starts to get like a little bit muddled, and her world starts to turn upside down, where for the first time you get a different shot of the armchair in her living room. And you've become so used to the fixed views of the inside of this apartment that for you to suddenly see a new bit of the apartment from a new point of view is actually quite shocking within the context of the film. The way that the pace works to force you to think about the events, to live the events that she's living, is very clever. It's where the power of the film comes from. I thought it was kind of fantastic.
Yeah, it is. And so there are no close-ups, really. Basically, it's based on where the movement is in the room, where the actors are moving, that gets you a closer view. And sometimes a lot of the action happens off-screen because the frame is just showing you what is now an empty room, but you learn her routines. You really learn her life. So you know what she's doing off-screen by the sounds that are happening. So the silence, actually, for me, it really enhances those few sounds that you do hear. I remember listening for the elevator, because you know that she's getting visits and the neighbors are otherwise very quiet. But I was listening for everything as a result, because that was such an integral part of the film.
And there's something about the way that, because the camera doesn't move, it's extremely non-judgmental, isn't it? It just shows you, what is happening without making it makes absolute minimal comment on what's happening. It allows you to make your own decision. I wrote in my notes here, the film shows Jeanne and does not judge. Who is the camera? In this film, the camera is the eye of God. It sees everything without judging.
I just think God judges, doesn't?
That's his main job, isn't it?
Yeah. Judgment Day. So we do get a bit of exposition through a letter from Jeanne's sister, who lives in Canada. We know that she's been widowed for 6 years, that Jeanne has been widowed for 6 years, and there's some contact with the family in Canada, but not much. On day 2, something that happens is a doorbell rings during her chores. It's not the day's client, but a neighbor dropping off a baby. And it's interesting how Jeanne just takes the baby carrier, pays little attention to the infant, goes right back to her routines. The neighbor is actually played by the director. Miss Ackerman is completely off camera. She's never invited into the space. She's probably gone 10 or 15 minutes. I don't even know if that's real time, or it probably is real time, honestly, with this film, before she comes back to collect her baby. So a question arises for me immediately, like, she's living this well-structured life. It's all organized, but you wonder about her happiness. She doesn't seem happy. She doesn't smile a lot. And nothing happens in her life, and nothing happens in this film, yet everything happens. It's sort of about nothing and everything simultaneously. And this is the point where I started to think, life it's by its essence full of all these dull moments, and how we approach them says a lot about who we are. And she's got that stiff upper lip. She's just doing her chores, running her routines. And that's why the film kind of feels like constant characterization as a result, because you really learn her resilience. You learn her character going through all these activities that should be absolutely boring, I never get the idea that she's happy, but she's succeeding. She's pulling it off as a widow.
I'm going to roll back to the neighbour for a moment there.
Yep.
So this happens twice, isn't it? That the neighbour drops the baby off and, and appears to get the baby back after, like you say, 15 minutes.
Yep.
What is happening there, do you think?
They are exchanging solids. Those are solid favors. So my feeling was the neighbor is also a sex worker.
Yeah, right. Okay, I was going to say, I thought the same thing.
Yeah, drops off the baby, and then at some point, Jeanne probably has something for her to do, or this is just a routine. So yeah, that's exactly. And again, that's the viewer doing a little bit of work to figure that out. It took me on the first visit, wasn't sure, but the second visit, I definitely was. So it's, I mean, in some ways, it's a super efficient film in the sense that you're getting these really non-dialogue scenes for the most part. The neighbor does rant at her for a little while, but Jeanne is not really interested in talking. She just wants to get back to all those routines.
Although, interestingly, when the neighbour does rant at her, she has this kind of weird sort of existential crisis at her, doesn't she? She's kind of saying, I don't know what to do. I was queuing up at the meat counter. I had no idea what to order. So I just ordered randomly the thing that the lady in front of me ordered.
Yeah,
it's like the neighbour is also somehow kind of numb to the world and doesn't know what to do, or
out of place in the world. I imagine if you're a sex worker and your neighbors know about it, then you probably feel a little bit ostracized. So you're just doing what other people do to feel normal. It's a great piece of characterization. It's wild that it comes in such a slow movie feel. Okay, I think we move on to client number 2. After client number 2 comes, I think we only see them in the dark, which is very interesting because she's always turning lights on when she's going to be in the room and then turning them right off. But when he's leaving, I think that's mostly in the dark.
Yes.
And Jeanne is just uncharacteristically frazzled. She's a mess. Something happened. And this is where her acting totally changes. She has to sort of become a different person because her life has been disrupted. She doesn't wash herself. She ends up spoiling dinner and the potatoes because she's not focused. She's inattentive. And this is where Delphine Seyrig just does wonderful acting because she has to become a totally different character all of a sudden. And this is one of the most striking midpoints I've ever seen in a film because it's a complete change from the first half of the film. Ackerman has spent so much time setting up this ordered world, and then all of a sudden, one thing happens in life, and we have no idea what happened to precipitate the change because all the client's visits to this point have occurred off camera. And the film sort of starts to pick up some pace, and we clearly see the upset interior mind of the protagonist. So we always talk about that when we're writing about characters. How do you see what's inside just using pictures and not having them confess in dialogue? Here you see it. And I was amazed how this midpoint struck me as a viewer.
But the actual moments of her kind of personal disintegration are so tiny, aren't they, and subtle. It's just she drops a brush when she's cleaning the shoes.
Yeah.
It's these tiny, or she drops a spoon. It's these little tiny things.
Yep.
Yeah, but that is enough to represent her disintegration.
Yep.
It's fantastic. It's such clever and effective, understated storytelling.
So that's day 2. Sylvain, her son, comes home. He kind of notices that things are askew. The apartment's not as tidy, and his the dinner's not perfectly ready. So it's very atypical for their evening. As he goes to bed, he talks about a friend who's talking about sex in school, and he's kind of experiencing some revulsion. And eventually, Jeanne Dielman just sort of cuts the scene short and turns lights up. She's always turning lights on or off. She turns lights out on him at the end of day 2. And I think, it's certainly another indicator supporting this idea that she's sort of uncomfortable with the sexuality and she might not be the happiest of sex workers out there. And she doesn't really want to talk to him about it at this point. I like that moment, and it sort of ends day 2, which is the odd day. I think we need to talk about the trips that she makes with her son at the end of each day. That's one thing I did not get. And I think I forget if they do it on the end of day 2 or not, but they sort of leave the building after dinner before he's going to bed each night. And then it's not clear at all. And I didn't know if I needed to turn the brightness up on my screen or something like that. I didn't see anything. Did you catch any of what that was about? Or
my main take home from those scenes was that they have quite interesting streetlights in Belgium, I thought. But otherwise, you absolutely can't see a thing, can you?
Yeah.
I mean, it feels like it's just purely available light. I am guessing that most of the film was shot in a studio. I don't think it's a real apartment.
Okay.
Because I didn't see how you could have fit the camera in.
Yeah.
But these parts, these brief outdoor jaunts, must be shot with available light on real streets.
Yeah.
And it was. I took nothing more from it than that they have a little walk around the block for some fresh air after dinner, but they say nothing.
Okay.
They don't speak to each other. It's not that they chat about this or that, or they go somewhere even. It's like they do one little spiral around the apartment in utter silence and then return.
That's possible. Yeah, I was just wondering if there's something more there, and I was just getting a little lazy or was just clueless, but it was very difficult in part because of the lighting, but also just because of the setup. Like, where would they go after dinner? It's not an ice cream, for example. They're not going out for a snack or something like that, or to visit a neighbor. So, but it's all part of the routine. Day 3 is sort of much back to normal. She helps her son get ready and goes to school. She returns to her chores, but she starts to encounter these problems again. She spills some things. It's not terribly messy, but it's just not the routinely well-ordered day that she's accustomed to. She's alone. You really don't sense her loneliness by this point. There are never really any neighbors around. She's going in and out of the building with some frequency. You never see a neighbor. You only hear the one neighbor. But one thing that strikes you on day 3 is that she sits doing nothing where normally she's always doing something. Yeah. She has a couple moments where she needs to sit down. So you know that there's some changes going on. I loved a lot of the little metaphors that emerge in routine daily life. I'm the kind of person who probably reads way too much into everything in my life, but I loved it. The milk was bad, but she reacts by making new coffee. She's showing resilience. If something bad happens, you just don't think about it. You just undo it. And I liked that. She simply watches the coffee as it filters and brews, which is kind of odd. I don't remember her doing that on the first day, but she's definitely stuck in, and she's encountering daily life, and she's not avoiding all these chores. She's still doing them. The neighbor comes again, delivers the baby again, and this is a very different scene because it shows you that Jeanne, with the infant anyway, not a great mother. She's actually agitating this baby more than helping it, and then she eventually just sort of abandons it, lets it calm itself down, and you can still hear the baby crying as she goes back into the kitchen to sit. And that was the moment where I thought, okay, this neighbor is also a sex worker. She also needs the occasional 15-minute breaks from the baby, and they're just exchanging favors. We're getting to the climax. Sorry, we're taking a long time, but this is a slow movie. So
absolutely, it's a slow movie.
Jeanne goes on this bizarre quest for the perfect button. I know that doesn't sound like an action scene, but it is. I think it's Sylvain's coat or sweater needs a button, and she's going all around. I mean, we don't have these many button stores in Portland. I don't know, but in the 70s in Brussels, I guess there were a lot of button stores. She returns home and there's a package. She's been checking this mailbox again and again, and then the payoff is finally there's a package not in the box, but sort of lying against the wall. She's unable to untie it with her hands, so she crucially gets some scissors to open the package. Contains like a new nightgown was my feeling. She holds it up and, she's going to wear it at some point. Client number 3 comes and engages in some very disappointing and sloth-like sex, which Jeanne sort of loathes. She's just on her back. We should probably tell the listeners that every time a client is going to come, she has this towel on the bed. So they're just lying in this one position. And I thought he was dead for a moment because he just wasn't moving. It's just the strangest thing. So then I thought, oh God, he's punished for this terrible sex by getting scissors to the throat. So Jeanne has finally snapped. Who wouldn't? She never cleans up the sex/murder scene, or she never, even cleans up herself. So she sort of sits bloodied at the dining table. There's a little bit of blood on her blouse, maybe on her hands, and those waterfront lights just keep passing over her through the salon window. And at one point I thought, did she stab herself too? Is she just waiting to die? But then I was just thinking, how will life change now? And we don't see that because that's the end of the film. I feel like this was always going to be a really difficult film to end because it's life and every detail in it, and it goes on and on and on. So it's sort of a disappointing ending in the sense that you really come to really appreciate this woman and empathize with her. But it is the right ending, I suppose, in the sense that she's just snapped. She's had enough. And now she's bloody, sitting at her table, waiting for her son to come home. You have to do some work to predict what would happen in the future. But
yeah,
that is Jeanne Dielman.
all kind of turns around in those last two shots, basically, isn't it? And the final shot is about 4.5, 5 minutes. It's just her sitting at her table in silence, kind of doing nothing, watching the flashing lights outside. And it's at that point you realise those kind of blue flashing lights, they are obviously from some kind of neon sign or advertisement, but they could easily be the lights of a police car as well. I think that's what they're intended to kind of refer to. Yeah. Now that we're past the spoiler bell, can I read to you the Google synopsis for this film?
Oh, boy.
Which I think is absolutely incredible. I have to read it out to you. Okay. I copied it down here. Please. This is what Google synopsis is for the film. It's 2 sentences. It says... A lonely widow turns to prostitution to make ends meet for herself and her son, but things change when she kills one of her clients with a pair of scissors.
Oh, that's terrible. It's good. Much better than my synopsis. Shorter.
Which is absolutely incredible, isn't it?
Yep.
So this is the thing that happens in like the final 2 camera setups of the entire film. Is that second sentence?
Yeah. So it's incorrect to say things change because they don't really. She kind of goes right back to her sitting down and doing very little. And it's also you would think that would precipitate something. We'd see another movie after that, but we've already been in for 3 hours 22 minutes. You're not going to see anything more. That's bad.
That's astonishing, isn't it? I was so incensed by that. I thought I had to write something similar. So here's my new synopsis for Star Wars. Oh. Tell me if this makes any sense. Luke Skywalker is a kid curious about the Galactic Rebellion, but everything changes when he uses the Force to blow up the Death Star and is given a medal by Leia, a space princess. It's like just go immediately to the very last scene. That's what we want from all our synopses from now on.
Oh, man.
Now, you and I are men of a certain age, as we've discussed many times. I have I had lots of memories of my own mother when watching this film. So I would have been about 5 in 1975 when this film was made. So a bit younger than Sylvain, but my mother had a house coat that she would do chores in, and these kind of trips to the haberdashery department, sewing on buttons, the hours spent preparing food and then serving food. And even, when I was a boy, we had letters from Canada, and my father would painstakingly write these handwritten reply letters on that super thin blue airmail paper. It was a lot of my own memories of my own childhood brought alive by this film. To the extent the film kind of almost feels like a dream of my own childhood. So I felt a lot of personal connection with the kind of the story world in this film, and it certainly feels very authentic. This feels very real and very very alive, which kind of what makes the ending even more remarkable and shocking, because it is really kind of shocking. You have this moment when she snips the string from the parcel and leaves the scissors just hidden behind a picture. I think it's her wedding photograph, isn't it? That she leaves them behind. And it's very underplayed. And once again, this is not a Hitchcock film where the camera zooms in on the scissors. But it allows you to do the work to think, I haven't seen those scissors before. I bet something's going to happen. Just kind of just tickles your eyeballs with that. And then before she murders her final client, it's like the first moment when she seems to have like a real emotional reaction, doesn't she? So she and reading the summary online, it's not clear, and I still feel not entirely clear whether does she have an orgasm during the scene, or is it that she has this sudden, overwhelming feeling of self-disgust, but that she has like a very, very vivid emotional reaction. The first time we've seen her be extremely emotional at any point during the film, and that's what precipitates this sudden moment of violence. It is a pretty shocking moment, and not something that you would predict, I think, in the first hour and a half of the film. It really leaps out at you. This is one of the things that makes the film, it gives some of its tremendous effect. One thing I noticed during the film, which I thought was maybe my favourite detail, the son sleeps on this sofa bed.
Yeah.
And at night they unfurl the sofa bed, and he lies on it, and he's the only character who opens up emotionally, and he talks quite explicitly about the things that he feels and the things that he wants to know. And then every morning she folds the sofa bed back up, and that's exactly what she does to her own character as well. She folds herself into this small, neat package in just the same way.
Yeah,
it's a lovely piece of kind of mise en scène, I suppose it is, isn't it? It's of using the things that are in front of the camera to tell the story about the characters.
Metaphors everywhere. And in a very claustrophobic space. I think the claustrophobia is really important too. Most of the film occurs in the apartment, and the apartment he's sleeping in the salon because there's no bedroom for him. So it's really like a 3-room apartment, I suppose, right?
Yeah.
We see the bathroom. You got a bathroom. We spend plenty of time in the kitchen, the dining salon, and then the bedroom where her sex work takes place, and that's it. So you're enclosed, and as you said before, those cameras not moving. It's showing you fairly small rooms again and again, and it just contributes to the claustrophobia of her entire life. She has these outings, looking for buttons and whatnot, and doing some shopping, but it mostly takes place right there in that reduced world. One thing that really struck me is this is show don't tell to an extreme. Like Ackerman shows everything, which is it's great. I'll talk a little bit about how this film is really for a different era, I think. But filmgoers now, after seeing films for 100 years, we make certain jumps. We don't have to see every little entry and exit of every door. We don't have to see everything spelled out for us, because we can piece things together. As long as they're chronological, it's easy to piece things together. And sometimes you look at student films or young films that they show everything. The person leaves the house, opens the car door, turns the key, backs out, gets on the road, when in fact we can just see the person go out the door or just right to the road driving. She's showing everything. And I think again, here it's thematic, it's appropriate, because the style is all about showing her life in just painstakingly filmed detail, I guess. And it's really, her life is so established, and that the idea is that the payoffs are when something surprising happens. It really surprises you because you've sort of been lulled into this rhythm. And for that reason, I think, again, this is sort of a film of a different age, and maybe for a different age, or certainly for a different attention span. She has an inner life. And it's hard to sort of piece out together, but that's what's going on, is that she's really set on these routines because she needs that order, I think. If in this day and age, if she were looking at her phone all the time, she's an example of someone depending on external life to have an internal life. But she's clearly thoughtful about everything she does and all her busy work, and she's established routines so that she can do that efficiently. But I think that's the window into her interior life. Whereas no one's going to watch that coffee filter and brew right now. They're going to be on their phone texting someone, and that takes them out of their own life to a certain extent. Like, they're not really in that room making coffee. They're actually somewhere in the cyber world, talking about films with friends or something like that. So I think it's certainly where it works for a different audience, and I just couldn't see a film like this being made today.
Though I did think that the moments when she tells her son, no reading at the table, I feel like that reflects something that I say most evenings at the table, is, no phones at the table, or more likely someone tells me no phones at the table. But we still have that issue even today. We should. There's a lot more to say about this film, but I think maybe we'll talk about it when we try and bring the two films together.
Sure.
Let's before we do the synthesis, though. This feels so petty going to this after the profundity of Jeanne Dielman, but let's very quickly play Who Am I?
Ooh.
Who am I?
Well, not an awful lot of characters to choose between in the second film in today's pairing. And I would prefer not to see myself as any of the clients that give Jeanne Dielman a quick 50 in the afternoon.
That was my note. I'm certainly not those clients she has.
God, interesting. I think all those three guys are all Belgian filmmakers or film critics, apparently.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
So kind of film industry insiders playing these horrible, seedy men. If I was going to be anybody from the two films today, I reckon that I, weedy, self-conscious, awkward in company, I am Alan from Barbie, played by Michael Cera, who's the one kind of self-conscious guy who doesn't really quite fit in anywhere. And I thought, yeah, that's me. There I am.
That is a good character, and one that I do not remember at all. I mean, I don't think we had a Barbie in the house. I didn't follow Barbie and Ken very much, so I don't remember Alan. I don't remember a lot of the alternate Barbies. Alan was a revelation to me for sure. I think I am weird Barbie. I like weird Barbie. I just like that outside divergent thinking, problem solving, but sort of being seen as something of a weirdo. So I really responded to weird Barbie. I thought Kate McKinnon was great. It was a good character to have, and again, not a character I knew existed in the Barbie world. So those two characters are two people who are absolutely new to me, so I like that.
They must surely be selling Weird Barbie and Alan dolls now.
Surely. Well, we'll get to that. I think we're going to get to that. That's the big comeuppance at the end. I also really related to Jeanne Dielman. Honestly, I think it's just that all the chores. I do all that stuff. That's me. So disturbing. So I very carefully tucked away all the scissors after watching that film, hid them from myself.
This is what it's like to feel seen, isn't it? I feel seen.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. There aren't a lot of characters to relate to, but I definitely found one or two.
Well, let's bring the films together then. Okay,
yeah.
Let's and because these are once again the same coin, two different sides. But see if we can flick the coin, see both sides at the same time.
I'm going to start by just saying I can recommend Barbie. I think most people would find something entertaining or thoughtful in it, of all ages. I'm going to recommend Jeanne Dielman, but with some major asterisks. I think our audience needs to know it's slow. I think we've made that clear. It's more than 3 hours. Not a ton happens. But it has this effect of just slowing your brain down and lulling you in. It's kind of mesmerizing. And again, I watched it over 3 nights. That might help. But it's a little brain break from the modern world. But this is not an action film. This is not a popular film, I don't think, or popular culture film. So I recommend it with that asterisk. We've watched it for you. We've talked about it in great detail, so we've spoiled it perfectly for you. You don't need to see it, but I really was amazed how much I responded to it and how much I liked it. Again, maybe in small doses, an hour at a night.
What's interesting, I think, is that both of these films, Barbie and Jeanne Dielman, they're both kind of about the disempowerment of women. Or like the way that women are kind of, asked to fulfill expectations, although the expectations of them may change. And there's that great speech in Barbie about how, these days you're expected to kind of to be everything and do everything and, and be grateful and not be challenging. But there are still expectations which you are expected to fulfill. And, and you're expected to put your needs beneath those of others as a woman, whether it's in 1975 or 2023. And they both kind of detail a sort of existential crisis for a woman protagonist, and also they both kind of have as their kind of story goal a kind of resolution in the main character's relationship with a man. At least in Barbie, Barbie is at least able to help Ken mature a little bit. And in Jeanne Dielman, she does resolve her relationship with men in a pretty definitive way. But there's this big difference, which we've kind of alluded to earlier, which is that Jeanne Dielman is a film about a woman and the challenges facing that woman. And Barbie is much more a film that's kind of nominally about a woman, but really it's kind of mostly thinking about men and about masculinity. And so her own film sees Barbie reacting to men rather than being the full-on protagonist.
Yeah.
Whereas, at least for Jeanne Dielman, there is no question of who the story is, who the protagonist is, or who the issues are about and who the person with the problems is.
Yeah, I mean, I think true life lies somewhere between Barbie and Jeanne, and it's a lot closer to Jeanne Dielman, obviously. But I think you're spot on that the men play a big role in both films. Very ironically, I think, and sex does too. It's interesting that the climax. Oh gosh, I guess that's the right word. The climax in Barbie is that she gets to have a vulva, right? She goes into the gynecologist's office or something and says, "I'm here to see my doctor about my vulva."
So. And I wasn't at all sure whether that was something that she naturally arrived when she entered the real world, whether she was going to have to surgically get given one. I didn't quite understand what the gag was there, actually. But yes, absolutely, it's certainly it's about kind of taking ownership of her genitalia.
Yeah. So it's somewhat. I mean, this whole film has been about other forms of empowerment up to that point. It seems a little ironic that it comes down to that. It's a clever ending. I mean, I liked both of the endings in these films. I thought they were appropriate for what they were. Let's see what to talk about. There's so much to talk about. I mean, I think we should probably talk about the real reason why Barbie was made, and this is the big caveat for me. I will also say that there is a scene in which 3 Chevrolets are cruising down the highway right next to each other, and it looked like a Chevrolet advertisement. It was a Chevrolet advertisement. And then Fender got in there too. I guess Ken must have had maybe Rockstar Ken had a Fender amplifier, and that was in there. I mean, this film is definitely about advertising. It's definitely about Mattel. And props to Mattel on some level, because I think there's a lot of self-aware and self-effacing stuff in here. It's a clever piece of art and advertising. It works on both levels. Mattel uses their own logo to bleep out foul language, obscenities. I mean, I like this, but here's my take, is that I fear this is the beginning. I fear there will be a lot more of it. This could be a great one piece, but it's not going to be a one-off piece. There are going to be a lot of these to follow from a lot of other corporations, I think. So I feel that they've milked this for all it's worth. It's very clever the way they went back and introduced all these old characters and used Barbie Land as a prop or as a story world. But I think they're really just sort of they're kind of rehashing. It's brilliant. They're rehashing their old product line. So things are going to sell from the past and things are going to sell in the future. And I think they're just going to inspire other toy makers and basically junk makers to do the same thing. So I wasn't surprised to hear follow-up within a week of watching this film that they're already making and selling more useless, non-biodegradable plastic shit toys, and they're selling a lot of them. That's in addition to the $1 billion that's been made on the film. And so it's just a weird bit of success, I think, for the filmmakers. It's going to be a strange reckoning because it's a clever film. They're clever filmmakers, but there's some soul selling going on right here, and I don't think it's good for the environment. I don't think it's good for culture. I think it's a deal with the devil that I think it's really going to compromise their effort, and it's basically just big advertising. So that's my take. I liked the film. That's the dark caveat. And I wanted darkness in the film itself. I didn't want the darkness to be exterior.
Spread into the real world, yeah.
So
we can look forward to the Play-Doh cinematic universe anytime now. Yes, Frisbee the movie. It's all absolutely.
It's coming.
It's coming. That was something that Barbie made me think of, which is a piece in the Washington Post from last month, which was quite a bit talked about online. I don't know whether you've encountered this, called "Men Are Lost. Here's a Map Out of the Wilderness."
Oh yeah.
So I did kind of pick up a lot of talk about this. I read the article at the time, and I copied a little bit down into my notebook here, where it starts out with saying that men have a widespread identity crisis as if they don't know how to be.
Yeah.
I had this kid show up. I say he's a kid. He's an undergraduate, and the first question he asked me is, "What the heck does good masculinity look like?" And the guy she's interviewing here, who's like a doctoral student at an Ivy League university, and he says, "I'll be honest with you, I didn't have an answer for that." So there is this kind of well-publicized masculinity in crisis angle, which many people are getting many column inches out of, and this is a large part of what Barbie is kind of addressing in this kind of zeitgeisty way. I'm a little bit mystified by this notion of masculinity in crisis.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson is taking over our youths. When I feel like it's a strange question to ask, what does good masculinity look like? When you kind of think, well, if you have a book to sell, then I can understand that you may wish to say, or it's impossible to answer that question in any fewer than 80,000 words. But my kind of immediate reaction is, well, what is good masculinity? Is it maybe just not being a dick? Is that
Yes.
too difficult? Is that too difficult a place to start? And that's just four words. The other 79,000, you can have those for free. It's it's one of those issues where I kind of feel it shouldn't really have been built up into the big issue that it is. This does not need a 3,000 word opinion piece in the Washington Post. It's just, maybe try and think a little bit and don't be a complete dick.
Yeah.
And yet, this ends up being, the source of the major story beats in Barbie.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether, this whole kind of, Jordan Peterson men are lost angle will be the starting point for many other stories as well. And it's going to maybe be a fairly simple problem that ends up with very complicated solutions.
It ends up being Barbie. Ends up being a pretty political film, and I know that right wingers hate this movie. It's just too woke for them.
That's another good reason to recommend it. I like it even
Exactly.
more now than I did 20 seconds ago.
I loved how woke it was, and their response is totally expected and predictable and totally on point for them. But I have nothing to add to what you said. Just don't be a dick. That's the starting point, right? I mean, that's most of it right there.
That feels like 80% of the journey. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think I can do that. I think I've been doing a pretty good job of it, and I'm going to continue doing it. Sadly, I think there is definitely sort of a masculinity problem in the United States. It's not that men... it's not that the questioning is not the problem. Just being better men is I think the problem in this country anyway. So I'm going to go to something kind of related that's uncomfortable for me, but
Oh yes,
and it's Jeanne Dielman. It's the big difference between this book is these two films is I think anticipation. So I have this confession. There were moments where I found this film sexually exciting. I know that makes no sense whatsoever, but watching the characterization, I just assumed Jeanne was this amazing and super professional sex worker because she did everything so beautifully in her house and with such attention and loving detail, But it's sort of this, it's Jaws. It's not showing the shark until you have to, right? So I found myself really interested, even on this purely physical level, that towel down. I kept thinking, okay, that's key. So it's very funny to find that it's actually totally boring and that the sex is just humorously underwhelming. It's not shown. Ackerman doesn't show this until the very end of the film, or maybe the last 20 minutes. And it kind of occurred to me, the guy probably deserves to die for being such a poor shag, and he makes her want to kill him, I think. So I love the anticipation because I just assumed it was a different kind of exotic Belgian sex that was happening. And that's why she was so highly paid, and that's why she was so good. But it was an interesting play on anticipation, I think.
So the moral of both films basically is men be better, isn't it?
Exactly. Thank you. End of podcast. But I think, by comparison, there's not much anticipation other than who's the next person to advertise in the Barbie film. And, Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach are serious filmmakers. I'm kind of torn on their work. I'm not a big Baumbach fan at all. And Greta Gerwig, remember her as an actress, and I think she's really coming into her own as a director and all that. But it's just this deal with the devil of the advertising. And I think that was always on my mind watching this film. It was like, what's the next bit of advertising? What's going to happen next? Because it just feels, it looks like an advertisement in many places too. So, so different levels of anticipation between the two films.
Money changes things, doesn't it? And
Yeah.
$1 billion is a lot of change.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm difficult to imagine that we won't have a Barbie 2 and then a Barbie 3.
Ooh.
And it's difficult to imagine we won't have this notion that somehow cinema has cracked the selling toys again problem, and we're going to have more and more adverts that we pay $10 to go and see on a big screen.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to see a Jeanne Dielman at a slightly different address, like 24? 24,
I think she will probably be in prison for 30 years, won't she? Yeah. Right. Well, from the sublime to the slow, let's have a quick chat about what also has been playing at this theatre.
Yeah.
So, a bit of a funny week for us this week. I was searching around on the list of most popular films on the streaming sites to see something we could all watch as a family, and we watched Everything Everywhere All at Once last Saturday. And I tell you what, I think there is still too much dildo fighting in that film. But watching it a second time round, I enjoyed it tremendously more than the first time.
Oh, good. Okay.
I think I was able to relax into it a little bit more. I understood what I was letting myself in for.
Yeah.
And actually found it very enjoyable the second time round. Worth seeing a second time, I think. Better second time than the first time.
Okay. Huh.
How about you? You seen anything else this week?
Well, yeah, I would say that, first of all, that's the one film I get the most flack on for my my critique. So maybe I'll sit down and watch it another time. I had a pretty good week. I sort of eavesdropped, and I guess it's secondhand viewed a Ted Bundy docuseries on Netflix. He's a serial killer from the 1970s, which it paired well with Jeanne Dielman for some reason, but in hindsight, the thing that I really watched full on with full attention was a film called Bombshell. It's the story of Hedy Lamarr, who was she's an Austrian-born actress in maybe the 30s through the 50s or 60s. Went out to Hollywood, considered one of the most beautiful women in cinema and film history, but was also just a brilliant scientist, and she actually invented some of the sonar detection for underwater torpedoes and things on the side. This was her side gig. And
that's one of those things where, if it appeared in a film, you would think that's a totally ludicrous subplot, absolutely absurd.
And there will be a biopic probably soon, but this was a great documentary, and that same technology is used basically in everything: cell phones, satellite technologies. She's made this, and she did not really get credit for it, and she didn't get compensation for it. So she ends up sort of living an impoverished life by the end. And one thing that really struck me was this. Do you guys study Ponce de Leon at all in England?
I don't think I could even spell Ponce de Leon. Okay. I don't even know what that is. Is that like a marzipan cake that you have with tea in the afternoon?
Sounds delicious, but I would not eat Ponce de Leon because he would be rotten by now. He's probably a 16th century Spanish explorer and conquistador. Oh. He goes to Florida to find the Fountain of Youth.
Oh.
And what he actually found was the very first known and documented plastic surgeon. Because Hedy Lamarr just starts going into the plastic surgery spiral, and she's gorgeous. She's beautiful. And then she starts, probably when she gets into her 40s or 50s and her Hollywood career is kind of winding down. It's just this cautionary tale because she just goes in for way too much plastic surgery and loses her beauty. And she's kind of lost her money. And she's not compensated for this technology she's invented. And it becomes quite tragic. So I just wonder, have you been involved in plastic surgery as an anesthetist? Are you in on any of those? That's a very elective surgery, right? I can't.
Well, you see, so there is a difference between plastic surgery, which literally just means surgery of the skin, and it's tremendously clever stuff, and you can move bits of skin from here to there, and you pull this bit up and then you cut out a bit of that. And so that is commonly involved in the breast cancer surgery that we do every Friday afternoon, or every Friday all day, actually. We do quite a lot of plastics, and it has its own challenges for anesthesia, and it's all about trying to keep the skin warm and make sure you get a good blood supply, and that's all kind of cancer treatment. Whereas the other side of that coin is cosmetic surgery, which may be plastic, I'm kind of not involved in any of that at all.
Okay.
I do have friends who are involved in that, and apparently the money is really very good.
Oh yeah.
But it hasn't reached its hands all the way into the NHS yet. So
Yeah.
Well, the health service has managed to avoid that particular hot potato.
I think the origins of what you would probably call plastic surgery come from World War One. Like all these soldiers coming back disfigured and whatnot, and then surgeons really wanted to help them heal and give them new faces or new limbs or whatnot. And of course, it was just sort of co-opted by the capitalist medical industrial complex, and
there's money in those creases.
Turned into cosmetic surgery. So,
many years ago, I used to work at Sidcup Hospital, which was one of the first places that pioneered this kind of surgery just after the First World War. And so they have a fantastic library of photographs of before and after for soldiers from the trenches who had bits of skin grafted from here to there. And it's remarkable, brave, astonishing work. But it becomes something different now.
Well, if your podcasting career doesn't take off, but it already has, maybe there's some cosmetic anesthetist work for you.
Everyone's got to pay the rent somehow. What are we going to watch next time?
I think we've settled on Mission Impossible.
Oh, pod favorite Tom Cruise. Yes, returns to the pod. Mission Impossible. But we will be comparing it to the film that I can never get the name of correct. So I believe the correct name is the 39 Steps. But if I call it the 49 Steps or the 29 Steps or the 73 Steps or whatever, you get the idea.
39 Steps. Hitchcock classic. And what's the full title of the Tom Cruise vehicle? I think it's
Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning, Part 1, semicolon, Certificate 15, something like that. So
my confession going in is I don't think I've seen an entire Mission Impossible film in my life. So I'm jumping right up to, this is probably the fourth installment, or
oh no, this is like the seventh or the eighth. I think.
Okay,
absolutely, yeah. You've got a lot of catching up to do before next pod.
Going in for the Two Real Cinema Club family. I'm going in for you in advance. Reconnaissance.
Right, so we will be back. In the meantime, please smash the patriarchy. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you next week for some popcorn counter and another chat with Michael Pro as well. Awesome. Good. All that to look forward to. See you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.